Kibra race. With me in studio is Mule Musau. He's the national coordinator, ELOG. And before we tell you what's happening at the tallying center, let's talk a little bit more, Mule, about what transpired today. And I want to take you back to something we spoke about a little bit earlier on the protecting of the vote that we saw largely today. We keep hearing about it as well right now. And what was curious for me is that in other by-elections, even in the general election, no one is allowed near the polling station. In fact, during the voter education time and when they're running that campaign as IEBC, it's always emphasized, after you vote, leave. Why was it this was allowed? Because it is from that protecting of the vote, and then you see these instances of violence, intolerance, people being roughed up. Why was it allowed in your view?
Well, we know, of course, that this is an election where there was a lot of hype in terms of the interests which were there. After, of course, it was called Baba's bedroom. So there was a hyper activity. Everybody wanted to compete at the highest level. As far as the laws are concerned, once voters cast their vote, they're supposed to get out of the polling station. A polling station has a number of meters. They actually put a perimeter tape that indicates where the polling station is supposed to be, the end of the polling station. So people are supposed to be outside that tape. Majority of the places that we are visiting today, yes, people were outside that tape, because remember, this is the elections which are being conducted in an urban setting. In the rural areas, those 400 meters or so will give you an indication of some distance away from the polling station. But in an urban setting, I mean, it's a confined space. And therefore, if you're in a primary school, for instance, Yani Primary School, which appeared the largest of the polling stations, you have these tents inside the school compound. If you tap, you cannot be able to tap the entire compound. So you still find some spaces within that school where people could be able to, supporters could still be able to stand, or even just outside the gate. So they're roughing up, and especially in a place like a primary school where there is a gate, if you have supporters who are lined up around the entrance of that primary school or that center, then if they have been notified to rough up or to cajole anybody who would be coming in the station, be that if it's an opposing supporter, then they are starting in very vantage positions where this can actually be able to happen. So I think in future, there's some issue that needs to be taken into account in terms of the kind of security arrangements which are made, because it shouldn't encourage any situation where there could be an incident or any intimidation towards any agent or any supporter of an opposing team.
And let's talk about that voters registered, because we remember a while back during the campaigns, the ODM leadership going to IEBC saying they want it. They were given one, which they were dissatisfied, saying it just had names. So they moved to court, and yesterday, late in the day, that ruling directing the IEBC to supply and furnish them with a voters register that has identity numbers as well. IEBC contesting, they need 7 days. I imagine if ODM wins this one, that conversation might fizzle away. If they lose, it would be perhaps one of those would hear that is where the monkey business began. What did you make of that whole voter register concern?
Well, first, an update is that IBC actually did provide the register.
They did? Okay.
Yeah, last evening.
Okay.
They moved very quickly, and I think somebody did advise Chebukati very well, because I think that was going to be a point of conflict, a potential, just as you've described it, that's going to be a point of reference that you were given orders by the court. Remember the question of 2017, where the court gave some orders to IBC, opened the server, and it never happened. So you do not want another scenario where the court has given an order and then it is not being obeyed, because the court had given an order saying that they needed the register to be given before the election. So, of course, it was a very tight timeline, and that's why IBC was contending that they needed to be given at least 7 days. But nevertheless, late in the night, again, IBC really responded. I think they moved very fast. They provided the register to ODM, or it was given to them. Now, my major talking point here is what IBC was raising, because IBC talked about the question of privacy of information. Now, while our laws on privacy are really not very tight, and that's an area and an issue that must be discussed moving forward, the contention of IBC was that we don't want to give this information with all the details of voters to a political party and who have entrusted us with this information and which can be misused out there. We know, and we have seen in this country, was it in 2013 where our names were appearing in different political parties without even our consent? We know that your details can be used for commercial purposes. This is a data-driven, this is the era of big data.
Yeah.
And everybody is using whatever information they can be able to get to you. Either they are selling something or using it for something. So it would be prudent for IBC to try to protect as much as possible the information that they get from voters. But at the same time, we know that the Constitution does allow that the public or stakeholders need as much information from governmental agencies as much as possible. So we must draw the line somewhere and say how much information is required to be given, for instance, in this case, to a political party in respect to voters. So I don't think that line was drawn very clearly yesterday because of the rush in terms of beating the deadline. So we may need to revisit that issue once the dust settles and the Kibra outcomes are known, so that we can now be able to know where do we draw these lines.
Yeah.
But the good thing is that we diffused, IBC at least diffused any tension that could have potentially come from a refusal or an non-compliance with the order which had been given by the court. Yeah.
And this was arguably one of the closest watched by-election around the country, and perhaps because of the drumbeats, political drumbeats around it, and the narrative of outside of the actual candidates on the ballot paper, that it was pitting the deputy president against the former prime minister. So I wonder for you, however this plays out, for instance, if ODM win, it's their bedroom, as they've called it. It was expected they would win. If they didn't, is what would be really big news. But if, say, the Jubilee candidate comes a close second, this means there was a leg into the bedroom, because bedroom is very intimate. This is your private space, not living room or kitchen. What do you think all of this portends going forward politically? Well,
from a political point of view, from an election point of view, it was a good contest.
Yeah.
We think a number of issues have come through that people can be able. Remember, I talked about the issue of a non-voter in a particular constituency running for election. That's a new thing which has come through. There was, of course, the question or this demystification or an attempt to demystify the issue of strongholds, which is again a good thing from a competition point of view, because elections are supposed to be competitive.
Correct.
Healthy competition is beautiful, and this country will benefit a lot if we can be able to have this kind of contest moving forward. Politically, of course, there are going to be a number of permutations, a number of combinations or issues which are going to come through.
Yeah.
It is true that, and you've heard it from the members of parliament themselves, talking about 2022. Everybody's already talking about 2022 as far as this is concerned. We have a deputy president who has declared interest in the 2022 presidential seat. We don't know who are the other pretenders. Baba is expected to be among them. So if this was then taken in that context, and considering that we're going to be having that BBI report anytime, a number of reports, even the faith-led dialogue process is also giving out their report in terms of their collection of people's views. And then we have this census, which has now just released another powder keg into the political environment. What we see moving forward is that we have just heightened or hyped the political environment in readiness for 2022. So I think we are ushering in now a phase in which we're going to be in a constant campaign mode all the way to 2022.
Yeah, and for this election on a scale of 1 to 10, I wonder how you'd rate it, 10 being excellent, 1 being very poor.
For election day activities, like I said earlier, I would give them a 7. I mean, I think the election day management worked very well. But if you go back to the campaigns for me, the questions about voter bribery, some of the violent clashes between the opposition
and the hate speech, even in campaigns, the rallies,
I think that would be like a 3, because that was really bad. And that's what has raised the tensions. In fact, some of the observers were speaking about the question of voter turnout. You know, this issue about voter turnout, we are a little surprised ourselves as observers that it doesn't look like we are getting over the 50% mark. Perhaps we'll get to it when you get the official figures. But there was expectation that with this high voltage engagement over the last 1 month, at least they would garner some interest for people to be able to go.
Yeah.
But you know, sometimes it works in reverse. That you create all this tension, you create an atmosphere that intimidates, and that creates an environment that makes voters not confident, especially women, not confident of just getting into those polling stations. Because when you have rowdy young people who are, as they say, guarding the vote, for those, I mean, ordinary Kenyans who just want to walk in, cast their vote, walk away. They feel intimidated. So the environment, and when you're talking about a level playing ground, we mean that create an environment where everybody can be able to go and vote. Create an environment when you don't have to use money, for instance. I mean, money has been a big factor in these elections.
Totally.
So if you're talking about the haves, you know, I think there have been a little giggles about the kind of outcomes which are coming out with the rest of the 24 candidates getting 0-0s here. But that issue is also a testament of the weight of money. Because some of these are ordinary candidates. Many of those candidates even belong to Kibra. And they worked in Kibra. So the fact that they cannot be able to return even some very good, some positive results in such a cash-laden environment speaks volumes about how we have skewed our politics towards, working only for those people who may have heavier pockets than others. So it's really unfair.
Yeah. Thank you, Mula Musau. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We'll definitely continue to watch this one, see how it goes. Mula Musau is a national coordinator, ELOG, with us this evening on what he observed earlier today, but of course also in the lead-up, the campaigns, and all those developing reports from that. We are continuing our live coverage from the Tallying Center. We'll have reports and updates from there as well. But after this break, my colleague Abby Agina is